Welcome to the podcast. I'm very pleased to be joined by Brigadier General in the Reserves, Yossi Kuperwasser. He's the director of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, known as the JISS. He's also the head of the Institute for Research of the Methodology of Intelligence at the Israeli Intelligence Community Commemoration and Heritage Center. And Yossi has held a range of critical positions in the Israeli defense establishment. He was formerly the Director General of the Ministry of International Affairs and Strategy, and in his long career in the IDF, he has served, among other roles, as the Assistant Defense Attaché for Intelligence at the Israeli Embassy. He was the Head Intelligence Officer of IDF Central Command and Head of the Analysis and Production Division of the IDF Directorate of Military Intelligence. So really a wide range of roles, and I haven't even listed all of them. Yossi, how are you today?
Well, I'm good, but always in Israel, dealing with this security and strategy, you're always overwhelmed by the challenges that you have to face. So
Yep.
you're never really, complacent and can rest and relax. It's not an option for somebody who deals with these matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. As somebody who covers and analyzes these issues on a day-to-day basis, I very much identify with what you're saying, that you never know what's going to come next. But let's start with the Gaza Strip because we have an odd situation that's developing there. It seems to be a kind of limbo where we have two Gazas emerging, right? We've got the Hamastan Gaza, which is 47% of the Strip, and we see that Hamas is trying to begin to rearm, re-entrench itself. It has reestablished its regime of terror over the Gazan population. Occasionally, it's allowed to stray across the yellow line to look for bodies of hostages. But really, what we're seeing is a sort of reemergence of a mini Hamastan in the urban areas, and most of the civilians are there as well. And then we have 53% of the Gaza Strip that's under Israeli security control, where every single day terrorist infrastructure, tunnels, structures that are used for terrorism are destroyed. We've got maybe 150 terrorists on the Israeli side of Gaza and intense negotiations about what's supposed to happen to them, even though under the deal they're supposed to surrender or be eliminated. And so we see this rise of two Gazas and all these reports about, the International Stabilization Force and what it's supposed to do. So it seems to me that we're in a state of limbo, and I'd love to get your take. How do you see the current situation in Gaza, and do you think it's at all sustainable?
Well, it is a problematic situation. As I said in the beginning, everything here is a challenge. So the Gaza situation is a major challenge because, look, Israel has been cautious not to end up running the Gaza Strip right from the beginning of the war. And the main issue that separated the government from the military was that the government was ready to play with this idea that eventually we shall rule Gaza. And the military was very much against it and stood on his back feet to make sure that this is not going to happen.
Right.
And we ended up with a situation where we managed to, by threatening to do that, by threatening and convincing Hamas that we might actually take Gaza over and remove them from power by force. This was the one thing that made the difference and convinced Hamas to release the hostages. But now that the hostages are released, we're asking ourselves, well, is that so important? And the military again doesn't want to make it happen. And the feeling in Israel is that, okay, we reached the end of the war and to rearm now and to recall all the reservists and all that in order to finish the job. Well, I'm not sure everybody is very much in favor of that. And
Right.
this is being taken advantage of by Hamas, who says, okay, we are not going to do what is expected from us to do in the second stage of the deal, the plan, and we are
Yep.
not going to disarm. And we are going to rearm and strengthen ourselves and reassert our control of the population of Gaza, because almost all of the population of Gaza is in those 47% of the strip that are under
Right.
Hamas control. And the major question is whether the Americans and Israel have the appetite to move forward and disarm Hamas by force. The idea that Hamas will disarm out of their own free will that doesn't seem to be very probable. And the idea that the international stabilization force or any other force that is not the IDF will disarm Hamas is totally illusionistic. So this is not going to happen.
Yeah.
And we are stuck, and we are very happy that the first stage of the deal was by and large implemented. We still miss four bodies, but most of it was implemented, mainly the return of the living hostages. And we are now waiting to see what decisions are going to be made by the Americans, first and foremost, about the next stage. Well, the Americans are saying the right things. They're saying that Hamas has to be disarmed, and any progress on the deal is dependent on Hamas disarming. And
Right.
this is very important. But does it sound convincing in Hamas ears? I'm not sure. And especially it doesn't seem so convincing because you see that the main issue that worries America is to make sure that that the ceasefire holds. They are ready to invest a lot in convincing Israel to pour in more humanitarian aid, even taking control of the humanitarian aid. They are ready to work out some solution to those 150, 200, God knows how many terrorists that are still under inside Israeli controlled area near Rafah. And they are putting their main effort and weight on convincing Israel to allow the ceasefire to stay
Right.
in effect.
Right.
And this is the main issue for the Americans. And this is the possibility here, like in many other of the issues, of some light between the American and the Israeli positions. And but at the same time, Israel is not trigger happy about going to resume the war. So it's Hamas understands that this is the situation and they take advantage of it. And that's where we stand. I believe
Hmm.
that even though it's not very appealing, we have to finish the job and take advantage of the fact that America, the United States, is committed to that. And Trump, until recently, was speaking about it on a daily basis. That we have to take advantage of that. And if they do not deliver the four bodies, and if they refuse to disarm themselves, we should do the job all by ourselves. And because if we stay like that, yes, we do have leverages on Hamas. We do. First of all, we can delay the reconstruction and have some impact on the amount of humanitarian aid coming in.
Yeah.
So this is a sort of tool that we can use in order to pressure Hamas. We can even start building and reconstruction efforts in the areas we control because there's an article in the deal, article number 17, that says that we don't have to wait for Hamas to disarm. We can start reconstruction in the areas under our control, and this is going to
Right.
clarify that there is a clear difference between what's happening in Gaza under Hamas and what's happening in Gaza under Israel. And everybody wants to be in Gaza under Israel rather than be in Gaza under Hamas. But I'm not sure that we are going to use this tool because there are not many people in the areas we control. So whom are we doing that for? And I'm not sure that we want the people from the area controlled by Hamas to move into the areas that we control
Yeah.
by giving them incentives to that.
Right.
So, and we can open the gates to Egypt, but I'm not sure the Egyptians would like it. But basically, according to the plan, we can open the gates to Egypt and people can move mostly outside of the Gaza Strip.
Right.
So these are things that we can use in order to put pressure on Hamas, short of hitting it by the IDF military kinetic capabilities.
Right.
And this is the situation right now. We'll see if there's going to be enough readiness to launch another attack on Hamas, because otherwise we are going to stay in the situation we are experiencing now.
Right. And so it seems that, the situation that we have now is certainly an improvement from what many thought could be achieved. I mean, my impression is that the Gaza border communities finally have some strategic depth. And you remember everybody was talking about
It's not a
this.
strategic depth, it's operational depth. It's Gaza, it's a couple of
Right.
kilometers, it's not strategic depth. It's not
Right.
Sinai.
I'm thinking about, even threats like an anti-tank missile attack are harder to pull off, but had Israel withdrawn to the security perimeter, of say 700 meters to 1 kilometer, that would not prevent Hamas from being able to target Sderot with an anti-tank missile. But this situation certainly makes it harder. But you seem to be saying that at the end of the day, Israel cannot accept the current situation because Hamas is not going to disarm voluntarily. I think that's obvious. So the question is, do you think that Israel can diplomatically recruit the Trump administration for this next stage? Because if the Trump administration is kind of in love with the idea of a permanent truce, are we on a diplomatic collision course with our greatest ally? This is the question that seems to be rising up from the current analysis.
No, I don't think we are in a collision course. We might have disagreements, but this is not a collision course because
Right.
the idea, the principle that Hamas has to be disarmed, and if it's not going to disarm itself by its own will or by international forces that will take its arms away, then Israel has the right to do what needs to be done in order to disarm it. This is a very critical guideline and the principle in this plan. The Americans cannot say, "Well, we are against it." This was the core of the deal.
Right.
And on top of that, one other thing that we have to remember is that we are still going to control the Egyptian border and the Philadelphia corridor, which is
Yeah.
going to make it difficult for Hamas to rearm itself. Although I see all kinds of attempts to use drones in order to deliver weapons from Egypt to,
Hmm.
but I hope we are going to be able to deal with that. And if we are going to make it difficult for Hamas to rearm, then the situation is going to be better. By
Right.
the way, this is funny, but a little bit, but before the war, 4 months before the war, I wrote a piece called Disarmament of Gaza. And this piece called for exactly the situation that we are now. It's, without a war, of course. I said, if we are not going to do that, although it's going to be very costly and many soldiers are going to die, and we are going to face delegitimization from international community,
Yeah.
and even at home, there's going to be a lot of problems. But nevertheless, we have to build this legitimacy and do it because otherwise, the price we are going to pay is going to be much, 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 much higher.
Right.
And can say that I was extremely right in analyzing situation like that. And what we have accomplished until now is exactly what I said. I didn't say let's enter the city of Gaza. I said let's close over
Uh-huh.
the city of Gaza from around it and make sure that they cannot arm themselves. And that was my idea at the time. Of course, we didn't choose to do it, and we paid the price, the heavy, heavy price that I was speaking about.
Yeah, that's
But
very
now
interesting that you published that so close to the actual outbreak of the war, and it's a shame that it didn't get more attention from the decision makers when it did. But now that we are in that kind of
no, what
situation,
they told me, the decision makers told me the same thing that they told everybody else. Cooper, they said, don't you know Hamas is deterred? Everybody in the intelligence tells us that Hamas is deterred.
yeah,
So, what do you bother us with?
right. Right. The D word, I call it the D word. And the good thing is, at least when I don't know what your experience is today, but at least when I, am briefed by the defense establishment, I'm pleased to hear that the word deterrence seems to have vanished from the lexicon and their examining capabilities. But we'll get to that a little bit later. But if we do assume that Israel will have to go into Gaza City at some point and finish the war, if not now, then later. What do you think the stage after that would be? Could it then turn over to the ISF, to the International Stabilization Force? Would there have to be an intermediate Israeli military administration? How would you see a real post-Hamas Gaza start off after that kind of operation?
Well, it's very difficult to say what exactly is going to happen, but the nice thing about this plan is that it provides a structure that may be in place after Hamas is disarmed, even by Israel.
Hmm.
Because one of the things that we were worried most about was that we are going to get stuck with Gaza in our hands. We
Right,
don't want to lose Gaza.
right,
So this plan says, okay, if once Hamas is disarmed, this is what's going to happen. The ISF, technocratic government, and so on and so forth. This is what's going to happen. And Gaza is going to be de-radicalized and not serve as a launching pad for terror attacks against Israel, against its neighbors
Yeah.
in the future. So we have something to work with. Whereas if we did it without this plan, we were really going to be stuck with Gaza. We may be still being stuck with Gaza, but at least there is a plan of what to do next.
Right.
And this plan enjoys the support of the Muslim world and the Arab world and the international community and everybody else, and especially the Americans. So there's a chance that there's going to be enough international and Arab and Muslim support for implementing it.
Yeah.
It's far from being sure and clear that this is really going to be the case, but we have something to work with and convince people, look, this is the plan
Right.
you were in favor of, and now it's the time to implement it.
Right.
And this is going to be accompanied by a plan also that speaks about humanitarian aid, but more than humanitarian aid, reconstruction, rebuilding, and all of that. Everybody wants to have a share in that. And
Yeah.
once Hamas is over, then it's much easier to move in this direction.
Right.
So there's going to be, if we need to do it ourselves, following that, there's going to be a diplomatic battle to convince the world to do that. But it is going to be fought from a much better starting point than the one that we would have if there was no plan. If there was no
Right.
plan.
Right. So there is an anchor there that Israel can use and say, look, here's the deal that you all signed off on. And if push comes to shove, if the other disarmament efforts fail, which I personally believe they are certainly will fail, then when Israel comes in and enforces the clauses, it can say, well, this is the plan that you yourself signed on. I agree. I think that's a very powerful, at least diplomatic anchor that Israel has in its possession.
Right.
And I wanted to ask you one more question about Gaza before we switch to other arenas. There was a report yesterday by Al Hadath, the Saudi news agency, which was later denied by the U.S. State Department. The report claimed that the leader of the Al-Shabaab militia, this is a militia that Israel reportedly has been helping in southern Gaza. It's fighting Hamas. And it's repositioned itself now on the Israeli side of the yellow line, according to international media reports. There was a meeting that there was a report that there was a meeting between U.S. officials, CENTCOM officials, and the head of this militia. Then the State Department denied this report, said this is basically fake news. It didn't happen. And then there were kinds of speculations. Maybe representatives from Al-Shabaab met with U.S. representatives. We don't know. This is still sort of in the fog. But there doesn't seem to be any real doubt that militias that are opposed to Hamas have set themselves up on the Israeli side of the yellow line, and that there is a common interest here in setting up a post-Hamas future. How do you see this component? There's a really sort of intense debate that I've seen here in Israel between some members or former members of the defense establishment who say, this is a waste of time, and others who say, actually, this is important. It's not the solution, but it can be part of the solution. How do you see the issue of supporting militias with common cause, given our history with doing this in the Middle East as well?
Well, history is a good teacher, but it's not a guru. You don't have to follow
Right.
the lessons from history one by one. I think that looking into the future, we have to allow these militias gain more importance in the future of Gaza. They were courageous enough in order to cooperate with us. Some of them, not all of them. Some of them were courageous enough in order to cooperate with us and face Hamas, and they should be rewarded for that. And it's a courage that should be appreciated.
Yeah.
It's not easy. And the fact that they managed to finish the war alive is telling you that they represent some real force and not just empty promises.
Right.
And I think that we should try and help them. They should be integrated into the future structure of Gaza, that in my mind is going to be much more based on local governance than on overall governance of Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
And we should make sure that in the areas where they reside, they have the control. if it's Yasser Abu Shabab's militia in the area of Eastern Rafah, for example, if it's the Chiles clan in certain parts of the city of Gaza,
Hmm.
and so on and so forth. I don't know to go there, like 14 of them. But wherever they are, most of them, by the way, are more identified with Fatah than with Hamas. And we have to remember that the original situation of the population of Gaza was that they were divided more or less 50-50 between Hamas supporters and Fatah supporters.
Hmm.
And once Hamas took power, of course, those who support Fatah tried to hide themselves. But
Right.
once Israel entered and took control, then they reappeared. And I think we should support them and make it easier for them to control the areas where they reside. We can
Hmm.
use for that purpose, even now, the Article 17 that I mentioned before that says that in the areas that we control, we can start moving ahead with reconstruction. They
Right.
should be rewarded for not only facing Hamas, some of them even moved towards de-radicalization. And the curricula they use in the schools is not the one that is provided by UNRWA and Hamas and the Palestinian Authority,
Yeah.
but more, let's say, acceptable one.
Yeah.
And I think that all these moves should be appreciated. And yes, I think we need to find a way to promote their ability to govern themselves.
Right.
We don't need necessarily something that is the future government of Gaza. That we're talking about technocratic government. They have their own technocrats. They can rule themselves. And we don't need one government that governs all of Gaza. That is what we need the GITA for.
Yeah.
Uh, Temporary authority that is going to assist the governance, but led by Tony Blair and so on and so forth.
Right.
They should look at Gaza. But the technocrats don't need to look at Gaza. They can look at Khan Yunis or at Rafah or at certain areas of Rafah, because Rafah is very big, and certain areas of Khan Yunis, certain areas of Gaza City, certain areas of northern part of Gaza. In each place, there is a local tribe that or clan that resides, and they can take care of their own business.
Hmm. Very interesting. And let's jump quickly to Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. There are a lot of sort of, let's say, fears among the Israeli residents of Judea and Samaria that they themselves could face some sort of onslaught, terrorist onslaught. Now, we know that the IDF under Central Command and the Shin Bet are active, foiling the vast majority of these terror plots very effectively. And so Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad are constantly trying hundreds of attempts every few months, and most of those, thankfully, are foiled. We just saw a large-scale IDF drill, a combat drill involving striking predetermined targets in the event that localized command structures are disrupted. These are direct lessons that are being applied, from the 7th of October. And we've got the Palestinian Authority, which really seems to have become an observer at best in many of these areas. It doesn't seem to have any real control in Samaria and the northern areas. And perhaps just, Ramallah in certain areas, it has a security presence. How do you see the current situation in Judea and Samaria and the after effect from Gaza on this arena? Do you think the status quo is going to remain more or less the same? Is the PA in danger of collapse? And how should Israel treat the PA in light of the fact that it enjoys IDF protection essentially? If we put things on the table, they basically exist because of the IDF's operations against Hamas, but they incite against Israel and attack it in the international forums on a daily basis and take part in the delegitimization. So they seem to have the best of both worlds here.
Well, it's even more complicated because as we speak, Abu Mazen is traveling in the West and received everywhere as a head of state and gets all kinds of commitments and support, and totally ignoring the fact that this is the person who's paying salaries to terrorists on a monthly basis.
Yep.
And takes advantage of the support that he gets from the Europeans in order to do just that. And he's referring to the terrorists as the fighting sector of our society, and that should be rewarded. And its entire state of mind is how to reach a state that would be a basis for reaching all our goals, which is free Palestine from the river to the sea.
Yeah.
So that's he's just more sophisticated than Hamas, unfortunately, but it's not that he has a different goal that he's trying to achieve. And anyhow, Abu Mazen is going to be 90 this year, and he's not getting younger. So we have to also be aware that of the potential that something is going to happen to the leadership of the Palestinians in the Judea and Samaria area, the Palestinian Authority. And
Hmm.
God knows what does that mean, because even though he's trying to prepare an heir in Hussein al-Sheikh, Abu Mazen is not very charismatic, but he still is one of the founding fathers of the Palestinian national movement.
Right.
Hussein al-Sheikh is even less charismatic and less considered forefather of anything. So that's a big challenge that's waiting for us. And even before that, yes, the terror capabilities of the terrorists, Palestinian terrorists in the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority and also in Area C are
Yep.
growing. Some of it because the Palestinian Authority can do or doesn't want to do anything and is not able to do anything. And it's, as you said, more an observer than power that affects the situation. Also because of its corruption and many other problems. And Iran is involved. Iran is trying to send in a lot of weapons. We are watching the smuggling of arms from, especially from Jordan. From time to time, we
Yep.
manage to foil some of these attempts, and we realize how big the effort is. But we cannot guarantee that we are foiling everything. And, so this is clearly a big challenge. So what we need to do is a combination of two things or three things. First of all, improve the defense, both along the border with Egypt, with Jordan, to make sure that we minimize the smuggling impact,
Hmm.
and around the communities in the West Bank to make sure that they are not going to be faced with a similar situation that happened on the 7th of October. We don't have a Hamas army as we did
Yeah.
in Gaza, but it's enough that one cell somewhere is well enough armed and carry out an attack like that. This is something that we shouldn't be target of.
Yep.
So we have to improve very much the defense around the communities. And third, we have to make it difficult for them to arm themselves and to prepare to carrying out attacks. Just like this is the lesson from Gaza Strip. We
Yep.
were watching how while they were preparing themselves. We can't let that happen. We learned this lesson in all the arenas, in Lebanon, in Syria, in the vis-à-vis Jordan, and in the West Bank. And we have to take preemptive steps to make it impossible for them to reach the point where they can carry out such attacks. We did a lot of stuff. We carried out several operations in the refugee camps in the Samaria area that make it much more difficult for anybody to prepare a terror attack from there. There's never 100% in this fight against terror.
Yeah.
But I think it made life much more difficult for the terrorists. You don't see today the same lion's den in Nablus that we used to see before the war, and other organizations in Jenin and in Tulkarm. We took care of that, and we made life much more difficult for the terrorists in the West Bank, and we should keep mounting these attacks. And the third thing that we have to do is think about the day after.
Right.
What's going to happen if Abu Mazen retires? It's going to be a very complicated situation. One of the options is a chaos, and
Yeah.
everybody holds anybody's friend's throat. God knows, because there's no system that defines who's going to be the next leader.
Right.
There might be that the next leader is going to be Hussein al-Sheikh, and everybody's going to say we'd rather support Hussein al-Sheikh rather than kill each other. That's an option. But there's another option that they were not going to follow up, and Hamas is going to also try to translate its wide support in the population in order to have a bigger say in how the West Bank is going to be governed. And it's a very messy future that might wait for us. And one of the things we are trying to do right now is to find the equivalent of the tribes in the clans in Gaza
Yeah.
to support them. But there are some similarities, but it's not the same thing. It's going to be much more difficult to do it in the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority. And what we need to do simultaneously is to tell the world the truth about the Palestinian Authority. It's okay, now we don't want to fight with it in the areas it controls in the West Bank, but we do not cheat ourselves in order to believe that this is a force that we can make peace with.
Yeah.
It's a force that supports terrorism, incites to terrorism, fights against Israel in the international community in the fora. That's what we are facing here. And we have
Right.
to keep trying to at least convince the Americans that this is the case. I was very happy that the language of the plan for Gaza, in reference to this matter, said that the PA has to go through harsh reforms. And when Netanyahu refers to what kind of reforms, he said the reforms that were expected from them to take under the previous plan of President Trump, the 2020
Mm-hmm.
plan.
Mm-hmm.
And in these reforms, the Palestinians had to change their narrative. They had to accept that there is a Jewish people, that the Jewish people has a history in this piece of land called Eretz Israel, that they call Palestine. And that therefore there is a point in reconstituting a national homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine, as was stated in the beginning of the mandate given to the British. And that the Jews are not such terrible creatures as they would like to present them, and that they should reach a peace with the Jews and not kick them out of here and struggle against them until the demise of the state of Israel. And they should accept an agreement with the Jewish state. And Israel, they should accept it as Jewish people with equal rights to everybody who's not Jewish. But this is the state of the Jewish people. The Palestinians are not ready to accept Israel as such. They're
Yeah.
ready to live next to Israel for a temporary period of time until they are going to be strong enough in order to get rid of Israel. And in that temporary time, they're ready to accept Israel as the nation, as the state of the citizens of Israel. It's
Yes.
all of the cities.
Yeah. And that, by the way, reminds me that, one of the demands of the Saudis, at least officially, for normalizing, and of course the PA claims that this is its demand as well, is for some sort of Palestinian state. And, for an Israeli audience after the 7th of October, that sounds pretty crazy when it's clear that this would become a failed terrorist state at best and taken over by Hamas, as we saw in the Gaza Strip. So, how would you answer, to the international community when they say, okay, now you've won the war, now focus on a two-state solution? What would your answer be to that kind of rhetoric that's coming constantly from the international community?
I say two things. First, that for that to be considered, the Palestinians should go through this huge reform, not only on the corruption and other matters that have to do with their performance, but also in their narrative. That their entire narrative should change. If the Palestinians would accept that Israel has a right to exist as a state of the Jewish people, then there's room to discuss the option of Palestinian state, but not before this is going to be implemented. And it's not. This is going to take dozens of years, because it's not only that there is a declaration; it has to be inculcated into the minds of the Palestinian people. What they are taught today, from the day they are born, and through everything that they are exposed to, is that Israel doesn't have a right to exist, and Palestine should be free from the river to the sea. That's what they are told, that they should struggle in all kinds of forms, including terror, in order to free Palestine. And that's what they're told. The Jews are terrible creatures.
Yeah.
Nobody can stand the Jews, and that they are fighting for Islam, and not only for the Palestinian people. They are fighting for Islam in this attempt to clear Palestine from the presence of Jews. These are all the things that they are being told day in, day out. And once this is going to change, we can start talking about something different. And that's why the opening words of the deal, of the plan, are that Gaza is going to be de-radicalized.
Right.
This is the de-radicalization that needs to happen. And the Palestinians should stop referring to themselves as victims and the only victims of this conflict and start looking at themselves as partners into having peace with the Jewish state called Israel. And once this is going to happen, we can discuss the option of Palestinian state.
Right.
If we have the Palestinian state before this happens, we'll end up with the same situation we ended up in Gaza. This
Yes.
was a quasi-Palestinian state governed by Hamas, and they did not focus on improving the living conditions of the people living there, as some of us were trying to convince ourselves that this is the case. They were focusing on finding a way to get rid of the Jews living in the areas
Yeah.
of 48. The attack was that on the 7th of October was carried out from an area that was functioning as a Palestinian state run by Hamas in order to throw the Jews away from the areas of 48. This was not about the occupation. There was no occupation. The occupation, so-called, in Gaza ended in 2005.
Yes.
It's 20 years now. But they still were told all the time that they should prepare for carrying out this operation against the Jews. And look how happy they were and how they boasted in killing the Jews with their own hands and so on and so forth. But
Yes.
there's still, the debate is still happening right now, and this is extremely important to understand. The need to get rid of Hamas in Gaza is in order to engrave in the minds of the Palestinians, that 7th of October was a terrible mistake, should never be repeated. The price they paid was that Hamas paid for carrying out this attack was really painful, and it went all the way up to losing control of Gaza. And
Yes.
this is a message that should be delivered to the Palestinians, and they should accept it. Because if you look, for example, why did not the Palestinians in the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority participated in this intifada?
Right.
Carried out another intifada to support the Tufan al-Aqsa of the 7th of October. It is because they lost the second intifada. They know they lost it. They don't want to have another intifada.
Right.
We have to make sure that every Palestinian living in Gaza understands that 7th of October was a terrible mistake, and Hamas paid heavily for that and lost the control of the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
And, this is the main tool that would start paving the way for a different situation between us and the Palestinians. And once Gaza is de-radicalized, then we can speak also about a path to Palestinian self-determination that may take the nature of statehood. According to the plan, this is the Palestinian aspiration. According to
Yeah.
reality, this is not the Palestinian aspiration. Palestinian aspiration is to get rid of the Jews living in Palestine.
Right.
That's their aspiration.
Right. And based on, as you mentioned, this jihadist notion that a Jewish state cannot exist on what they consider to be Islamic land. And, it's interesting because when you look at the surveys, the public opinion surveys, however credible they may or may not be, it seems that in Gaza right now, the Gazan population is less supportive of October 7th, the idea of it, than the population in the West Bank, which is, remarkable because the population in the West Bank continues to show strong support for the atrocities of October 7th, and the population in Gaza, while still there are very disturbing levels of support there, lower than what we see in the West Bank because they're living with the consequences. So that seems to be in line with what you're saying, and yet still we see in the West Bank Palestinians that are so indoctrinated in this ideology, this Islamist ideology, that even though they see what happens to, the other members of their people in Gaza, still supporting October 7th, and no concept here of cause and effect, at least according to the polls. But you're right that in terms of action, we haven't seen large-scale intifada-like action by the masses. We haven't seen them mobilize. And I think that speaks probably louder than what they're saying in the opinion poll. So it's a very interesting, long-term
This is
question.
important, and this is important. It's important they support this idea,
Right.
even if they don't execute anything in line with this ideology. And it's interesting that they do not carry out terror attacks, all of them, because this tells you how deterred they are because of what happened in 2006.
Yeah, yeah. This the end of the Second Intifada, right? Which
Yeah.
is also what's interesting about the Second Intifada to me is as a sort of side note is that the pattern is even though the scale of the incident is obviously different, but the withdrawal of the IDF from the cities, of Ramallah, Nablus, and Jenin and Tulkarm, they turn into terrorist hornets' nest. Then we get the suicide bombing and shooting wave. Then the IDF returns. The pattern of territorial withdrawal used and then exploited by jihadists to build this genocidal infrastructure and then forcing the IDF to go back in really reminds me of Gaza, even though it's a much smaller scale,
Yeah,
but it seems
you're
to
right.
just be happening again and again. Let me take you in the time that we have left up north because we have a lot of dramatic developments happening in Lebanon and in Syria. I'll start with Lebanon. It's amazing how quickly we've gotten used to this new normal in which the IDF, as you were referring to earlier, is implementing a new doctrine, which is that when a threat is identified, it is neutralized. When Hezbollah terrorists are identified by Northern Command, by military intelligence, by the Air Force as violating the terms of the truce by trying to rebuild their terrorist infrastructure in southern Lebanon and in other areas, they are struck. And so we've gotten to a stage where hundreds and hundreds of Hezbollah terrorists have been eliminated since the November 2024 ceasefire. And Hezbollah so far is not responding, although yesterday we heard their Secretary General Naim Qassem say this can't continue, this has to stop or we'll be forced to respond. But it seems they understand that the minute that they respond, Israel will see an opportunity to take away even more of their capabilities. So we see a real strategic change here in Lebanon, and we see the Lebanese government, perhaps this is, by the way, some sort of hint about what might happen in Gaza, the Lebanese government and army talking nicely about this army Hezbollah, not really doing anything effective, more it seems cosmetic. Do you think that this situation is sustainable?
Well, it is, but there is a big chance that it's not going to be sustained.
Right.
It's sustainable because Hezbollah is not suffering to the point that it cannot suffer anymore. Even though Naim Qassem said it yesterday, it's not going to last forever. But they lost something more than 300 operatives during the year. It's very painful. It's meaningful, significant, but it's not necessarily going to convince them to sacrifice many more. And they understand, as you said, that if they change the policy, the results are going to be much greater from the point of view of suffering from the Hezbollah. And
Hmm.
beyond that, the question here is the justification for the existence of a force called Hezbollah. They are trying to convince the Lebanese that they have a reason to exist. It's just cause that for which they can keep their weapons. And it's very difficult to justify it. That's the problem of Hezbollah. It's very
Yep.
difficult to justify it. It's if they wouldn't be arming themselves, they wouldn't be redeploying in the south, if they would not be armed as they are and keep their arms, Israel would have not done anything. It would have been a golden opportunity for this country of Lebanon to start finally rebuild itself and regain capabilities to prosper. And once this is not happening, they all suffer. All of Lebanon suffer. We don't attack targets that belong to Lebanon. We attack only targets that belong to Hezbollah, especially Hezbollah operatives. But the pressure over Lebanon to do something about Hezbollah is causing the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people a lot of resources because they cannot function as any other country. And they are all paying for the. So if Hezbollah is trying to convince the people of Lebanon that it is their shield and it is an asset in making life in Lebanon better, what is the line of thinking that can be used in order to convince people that this is the case? when they are unable to make a living because of Hezbollah. And
Right.
when Israel is attacking targets in Lebanon, you might be affected by, well, Israel is using very precise ammunition in Lebanon, so Lebanese most of the time don't get hurt. But from time to time, it's somebody who's not a Hezbollah operative may get hurt as well. And the entire living in a situation where you don't know who is going to be attacked when is not an easy situation. And they're all paying the price because of Hezbollah's insistence to keep their weapons.
Yeah.
So I think that there's going to be a mounting pressure on Hezbollah to change it, and the Americans, I think, should help us in this because much of it depends on them.
Hmm.
And for time when there was a message that was not to our liking, when the Americans for a day said, make some gestures to the Lebanese government just because they said they are ready to endorse a plan to disarm Hezbollah. And we
Right.
said, no, once they start disarming Hezbollah, we, we are going to make many gestures. But first, they have to disarm Hezbollah. And the Americans came back to their senses and said, oh, maybe it's a better phrasing of what needs to be done, and let's go back to that. And this is the message that the Lebanese have to get, that they have to convince Hezbollah to disarm because this is the way to help Lebanon. It's not helping Israel. Israel is fine, but
Yeah.
Lebanon should be better off if Hezbollah is disarmed.
Yeah.
And that's the message. Now, Hezbollah has their own way of thinking, and they do not see it this way, and because they have to justify their existence, and they said, "Well, we are the weapons of the resistance, and we are the shield of Lebanon," and all this nonsense that nobody believes in, but they have to believe in. And since for Iran they're so important, the Iranians keep sending them weapons and keep sending them money in all kinds of new ways that we have to find and be able to stop. And if we are successful in doing that, it's going to be even more pressure on Hezbollah. But what we're doing, every attack we carry out in Lebanon is helping the government and the people of Lebanon in saying to Hezbollah, please disarm, disarm.
Yeah.
The problem is that the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people are not in any position to force a disarmament of Hezbollah. They are not
Mhm.
strong enough, they are not courageous enough, they are not determined enough, and they want to see things happen, as you said, observers. They are observers. They look at the situation and want to see Israel hitting Hezbollah. That's what they want
Yes.
to see.
So
If this is what they want to see. Eventually, this might happen because Hezbollah really, at one point, they can say, enough is enough. We cannot be killed like that. Let's do something. Once they do something, there's going to be a harsh Israeli retaliation. And I'm not sure this is going to bring about the end of the Hezbollah presence in Lebanon, but it's going to be preparing the ground for the Lebanese government and the Lebanese army to do something about it in the future.
yeah, it certainly seems to be the case. I agree that the Lebanese government is kind of waiting for Israel to do more. It really, even between the lines, it seems that it's just, waiting for Israel to do the heavy military lifting, and then they can
Oh,
try and exploit the situation to further repress Hezbollah. That seems to be the case. I totally agree with you. And it's a cynical game because, of course, we will catch all of the criticism, and they will hope in their hopes get the benefits. So. This is the kind of dynamics that we seem to be dealing with, um, and that brings me to Lebanon's neighbor Syria. We just had the Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara brought to the White House, as a completely legitimate international leader. President Trump heaping praise on him, and we have to pinch ourselves. This is the former head of Al Qaeda in Syria. This is somebody who still his current army that he has set up has got jihadists, senior ranking jihadists who were just a minute ago, Syrian-backed jihadists, Turkish-backed Islamist militias. And we're seeing, the beginning of what looks to be like an Islamist state being formed in Syria. And yet, here he is in the White House. What do you make of this? Is this going to be a diplomatic and strategic problem, Or are you confident in Israel's new doctrine, which, just for the viewers, just to give them a little bit of context, Israel's demand is that this new regime cannot send heavy military equipment or large military forces or any militias south of Damascus. They cannot massacre the Druze in southern Syria. And if they start moving those forces down, they will face Israeli firepower, as they have already done last summer. So how do you see this situation? It seems to be really a huge gap between the way the West is embracing this new leadership and what we're seeing here from the neighborhood.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's wise policy to go against the stream on that issue. We all know everything you said. We know who Shara is. We know the Americans also know that they know that he was a terrorist until recently.
Okay.
Uh, but it's an opportunity to have the new Shara. He's not anymore the Abu Muhammad al-Julani. He's the Ahmad al-Shara. And he wants to focus on rebuilding and reconstruction of the devastated state of Syria. And this is an opportunity. So Trump says, let's make the best out of this opportunity and turn Syria into a part of our stabilized Middle East. And if we can put Turkey as a force that would help stabilization, why not? And he's impressed with the fact that the Turks were helping in reaching the deal in Gaza. So in Trump's mind, autosuggestia, as we said in Hebrew, can
Yes.
you convince yourself, and by that you make others be convinced as well, because you have the power to make them convinced. And the United States has the power. If it was us, I'm not sure it would have happened, but
Right.
it's the president of the United States who is playing this game. So maybe there is a chance here. I was a little bit frustrated with the fact that I didn't hear President Trump saying strong enough that in order for you to get our support in stabilizing Syria and making Syria great again, you need to be more forthcoming to the Israeli demands. And what we heard from Shara after the meeting was that he's still with the old, the way he came in, the way he came out. Maybe we don't know enough until at this point what really happened in the meeting.
Hmm.
But and there are negotiations about some sort of security arrangement between us and the Syrians. But
Yeah.
what we hear from Shara is that he's still sticking to his demands in this respect. He wants to have some presence in southern Lebanon, in southern Syria.
Yeah.
And I didn't hear him speaking clearly enough about the issue of the Druze. We want to make sure that the Druze are safe, and he is involved in putting pressure on them. So this is very much very important to us, and we have to see this being solved. And but I'm saying,
Yeah.
first of all, we have some common interest with Shah. We
Right.
don't want to see Iran. We don't want to see Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is a common interest. We are on other issues. We may develop common interests. If he wants to reconstruct Syria, then it's a good idea for him to have some sort of an agreement with Israel to make
Hmm.
sure that it doesn't end up confronting Israel. And we are also ready to address Turkish concerns in Syria to some extent, and as long as our concerns are met as well.
Right.
And so it's not impossible to reach an understanding with Assad. I don't think
What
Assad is
about
going to be the
Shara?
next
Yeah.
sorry, Assad, Shara. I don't think Shara is going to be the next member of the Abraham Accords, but some arrangements, security arrangements can be reached with.
Okay. And are you worried, just briefly about the concept of, deception? We've been deceived before by Islamists, and the West seems much easier to deceive them. Are you not
Hmm.
worried that maybe he's playing for time and turning into a new threat from the north?
Definitely, we have to worry about that. He's a jihadist. He's not changed his color
Right.
altogether. He's jihadist. He still has very negative attitude towards the West in general and Israel in particular.
Right.
Look, when you see him shaking hands with Trump, everybody's looking at the picture and says, what's going on with Trump? Doesn't he know that this guy is a jihadist? Until yesterday, there was a reward over his head. But when I look at it, I say the same question. I ask the same question, but I also ask, what's going on with the Shah? Doesn't he know that this is the leader of the
Right. Right.
corrupt enemy of the Islam and so on and so forth?
Right.
State?
So so you're open to the idea that he might actually be changing.
I mean, I don't believe that he's changing, but I believe that he's becoming pragmatist.
Okay.
He's not becoming moderate. He's not becoming moderate. He's becoming a pragmatist.
Okay.
And out of pragmatism, there's a lot of things that can be achieved through pragmatism,
Right.
also for him and for us. So we should be pragmatic as well.
Understood. That's an important distinction. Final question, Yossi, we can't ignore, of course, the enemy to the east, what was until very recently seen as the head of the octopus, which is, of course, the Islamic
Indeed.
Republic of Iran, appears to be licking its wounds, still devastated by the blow to its nuclear and missile capabilities. But now, and I'm just had the pleasure of publishing a paper at the JISS about Iran's alliances with Russia and China and how it's trying to utilize those to begin a rebuilding program. And there's often talk in Israel about, oh, something's about to happen with the Iranians. By the way, I personally have been telling people that I don't think that's the case. I don't think there's anything immediate around the corner with Iran in terms of activation of state-on-state military force. I think the Iranians are much more interested in rebuilding slowly. How do you view this situation? Obviously, the threat remains. The capabilities are reduced. They want to rebuild. They also have huge internal problems. They can't even supply water to their capital city. And also, their whole promise of a Shiite empire and access with billions and tens of billions of dollars invested in Assad and Hezbollah and Hamas. And all of it seems to have shattered. Maybe we haven't heard the final word from the Iranian people. How do you assess the current threat level from Iran and into the sort of foreseeable future?
Well, first of all, I agree with you that immediacy is not necessarily so great of the threat. But Iran is under a lot of pressure. The result of the war in June, the snapback of the sanctions, the situation internally because of lack of water, scarcity of water, and all kinds of things. The Riyal is in a very bad shape. It's a very unstable situation. And the leadership is very worried that if they show any sign of weakness, this is going to be taken advantage of by the population that wants to see them out as soon as
Yeah.
possible. So in this situation, you never know in what direction they're going to go. There's a big debate inside the Iranian leadership between the pragmatists and the hardliners. And some of the hardliners, although they are not a majority, but some of the hardliners are closer to the ear of Khamenei than supreme leader than the pragmatists. And they're saying the way out of it might be by showing more force and threatening to escalate. And you hear the threats coming out of Tehran day in, day out. And
Hmm.
well, the pragmatists say, look, we are in a very very difficult situation. Let's negotiate with the West. So far, what we have heard from the leadership, the mainstream, is not listening to those pragmatists. They are not willing to give up enrichment, and they are now still waiting and hoping that something would happen and somehow it's going to be solved. But if it's not going to be solved, they might try to put pressure. So I'm not underestimating and we see that they invest a lot in rebuilding some of the capabilities. They can't rebuild fast the nuclear program, because
Yeah.
this was hit very severely. But they are, at least according to all kinds of information coming out of Iran, including the things that said by the Iranian officials, they are putting their focus on producing more and more long-range missiles. And they are preparing for another confrontation. So we
Right.
have to be very cautious and take them seriously into account and prepare ourselves. If there's one thing we learned from 7th of October, amongst many, is that you should listen carefully to what your enemy is saying.
Yeah.
And when the enemy is saying what they're saying and what the Iranians are saying, we should be prepared and we should be on high alert, keep our eyes open, keep very close cooperation with the Americans about it, sharing the intelligence with the Americans, so that if something happens, there's going to be a joint decision to do what needs to be done in order to prevent and preempt and not wait for the Iranians to attack us.
Right. And just a final question on that issue. It seems to me that one of the things that Israel did during this war in June was to deliberately leave most of Iran's economic energy infrastructure untouched. There were a few attacks there as well. That seems to be sort of a warning to the regime that, says, look, if you want to go back into a war, either because you rearm or because you attack, your economy is next on the line. There's nothing really stopping the Israeli Air Force from taking out the core of the energy infrastructure in Iran, which could be more devastating to the regime than June. Do you agree that that was sort of left as a threat on the table?
It was left because the attack was focused on the Iranian capabilities to have a nuclear weapon and to have missiles. This was the logic of the attack, and this was why we didn't touch Iranian economic facilities. But of course, any Iranian understands that okay, the next round is not going to focus on
Right.
nuclear facilities because we already dealt with all of them. The next round is going to deal with two kinds of targets that were not dealt with in the previous one. One is the economy, and second is the leadership.
Right.
That's why they are very concerned about another round.
Right. Okay. Yossi, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic 360-degree assessment of every arena. I have no doubt the viewers will be greatly enriched by your assessments here. I thank you very much, and I
Thank
hope that
you.
we will be able to do this again soon.
Well, let's hope so. Yes, definitely. Thank you very much, Yaakov.
Thanks.